Have any of you ever experienced a moment where you can't help but be concerned for the future of our kids, based on the way their parents act and ultimately raise them? I worked at a restaurant, specifically a frozen yogurt chain. A moment her husband came in with 2 little boys probably around 6 or 7. If you've ever been to a self-serve frozen yogurt store, they pull handles to get what type of yogurt they want. These kids start pulling down all the handles and yogurt went everywhere all over the floor and the walls. The husband started cleaning it up, but then the mom stopped him, saying that it was my job to clean up after their mess. She didn't stop her kids. I stayed 2 hours after closing trying to clean up the whole thing. Wish the husband had said, and it's our job to teach our children how to behave. When I was working for a pet store, we had a woman come in and argue with me about buying a bird for her 10-year-old 175-pound daughter. She wanted to squeeze a bird into a cage that would translate to locking a person in a shower stall enough room to stand up, sit down, turn around, and nothing else. She refused to buy a bigger cage, any toys, or even food, and threatened to call corporate when I refused to sell it to her. She kept insisting that she knows how to take care of birds, because she's had 4 birds in the last 5 years which all died. She was adamant that I was going to sell her a $9.99 parakeet and a $19.99 cage, the absolute cheapest in the store, and roughly the size of a shoebox, because she had exactly $30 to spend until she got paid next week, regardless of the fact that she didn't even have enough money to pay the tax on those 2 items, let alone everything else she needed. I kept trying to explain how miserable the bird, an intelligent animal capable of showing love and affection, would be, and the fact that it would sit, cry and scream for attention, and would hate people and bite them if they tried to handle it, and that it would most likely die in a few months kept in conditions like that. She said, "I don't care. I just want something for my kid to play with." I told her to go to Toys R Us, then wept for the future of our world. Good for you for refusing them. I hope corporate didn't give you any crap about it. I taught 9th grade English in an inner city school. Some of the girls in my classes already had kids, but nothing shocked me more than when one of the moms walked in, and I saw she was about my age at the time. This was confirmed when I had a conversation with her. Then, I had the realization that this younger than 30 mother was actually a grandmother. Basic math confirms that 14-year-old mom has a kid and her 14-year-old daughter has a kid equals 28-year-old grandmother. I worked retail in a rich area for about a year. On top of snobby women insisting that they are God's gift to this earth, I had horrible spoiled children being just awful. One day a woman comes in with her 4 or 5-year-old son. This kid ignores me and starts tearing things off the shelves while his mom remains oblivious. I am running after him asking him to stop, and he finally agrees, but decides he wants to run behind the counter and start rifling through my lunchbox. I lost it. I called his mother over, who chastised him briefly, implied that I wasn't on their level because I worked retail, and then left without really apologizing. I work at a kids amusement park, and although there are a lot of good things that happen, there are also a lot of those moments. So I am a ride attendant at this park, and I'm trained to drive a train, which is freaking awesome, by the way. Now, park policy states that if there is a line, you are not allowed to let other guests stay on the ride. Well, I'm walking back to make sure the exit gate is closed and I see that there is still a family sitting there, so I say, "Sorry guys, you have to get off," and at this point the kid starts throwing a huge temper tantrum. The mom says, "Can we just stay on?" And so I reply with, "I'm sorry, but there is a line and I'm not allowed to let people stay on when there's a line." Well, this lady tweaks crap on me and shoves her son out of the seat and walking to the gate, all the while saying, "That's good. Keep crying because the mean lady won't let you stay on the ride." It's people like her that make me hate my job. This happened Monday at my place of business. A guy I work with has a young son. He is not with the mother and she is pregnant by another guy. He was talking about how he is going to tell his son to beat up his future little brother sister. He also said he's going to tell his son that his mommy doesn't love him, so he'll hate his mom and like me. It almost made me sick to my stomach to think that he would actually do this. This guy seems like the type. That kid is fricked. I work as a server and I get a lot of kids at the place I work. I had one table with a child, 7 or 8, and his parents, and the kid was very demanding. Every time he asked me a stupid question or made a mess, the parents would just giggle. After him crushing up a whole bunch of crackers and throwing them on the floor, his parents laughed and said, "Don't worry, that's the server's job. They have to clean it up." The kid continued to request more crackers and continued to throw them on the floor while his parents giggled. Who the heck lets their kid do that? I'm sorry, but that was the last of our crackers. Every day on the subway, sometimes every other day, I see a child get on a packed train with their parent guardian and simply not know how to behave themselves. Sometimes I'll be sitting in a seat with a window behind it and a little untrained crap will literally crawl into my lap and look over my shoulder to look out the window, as though I'm part of the seat. Another common occurrence is for a child to grab the pole of a super packed train and proceed to spin around it while holding onto it, repeatedly crashing into people. Some kids even try to climb on the poles and try to use other commuters' hands arms as climbing holds. Most people are too amazed at the audacity of these little bastards to do anything. The other day I was on a very long line to get on a bus. The woman next to me had 2 young boys, probably about 8-9 years old. They decided that they were going to play tag on the line. At one point one of the little boys was attempting to run between my legs and hide behind me, as he pulled on my pant leg and his brother tried to follow without hesitation. I looked at the mother and she was just talking on the phone, completely ignoring her kids. Once we got onto the bus they proceeded to play their mobile video game systems with the volume cranked up and then randomly broke into song. The creators, calling them parents would be inappropriate of these little creatures, seem to never care. They just stand there as though their kids are trying to use you as a jungle gym or screaming next to your ear. Then, when you eventually can't take any more and you start to yell at the parent, they usually blow up and scream, "How dare you try to discipline my child?" Thankfully I am usually mad enough to create a micro scene and yell back, "Well, someone has to do IT, because you certainly aren't capable." Overly dramatic TLDR. A lot of people should probably be sterilized once they reach puberty. I did the swing around the pole when I was a kid. Once, parents took me off at the next station and scolded me. Also took away my Game Boy Color and I still haven't seen that bit of childhood since. One time I eavesdropped on a conversation happening outside between a mom and her daughter, who couldn't have been older than 7. The mom was talking to the girl like she was an adult about some sort of disagreement they had, and the kid is getting confused and frustrated because she obviously can't comprehend emotions on an adult level. Then the mom drops this gem: "Don't look at me like you want to kill me. I'll put you in a foster home, and if you look at your foster parent like that you'll get slapped around. But maybe that's what you need, a good beating. I just love you too much to give it to you myself." What the actual frick? It's like my mother can exist in 2 places at once. I teach at an inner city school. Near the end of a day 2 girls got in a fight and their moms were called up to school to take them home. I was standing in the front lobby after the kids had left when suddenly the 2 moms started screaming and cussing each other out. The principal managed to usher them out of the building before it turned physical. But when they got outside, one mom pulled a baseball bat out of her trunk. The other dug a glass bottle out of a nearby trash can. It took our principal, a security officer, and a large male teacher to convince them to leave. They peeled out to finish the debate elsewhere. Guess that shows where their daughters learned their conflict resolution skills. I work at a Dairy Queen in the southeast US. The other day a girl close to my age, I'm 20, was eating with who I would guess were her mother and 2 boy children. The children were running amok, screaming, demanding ice cream, and just kind of running around everywhere. The girl would get up, drag them by their arms back to the table, and her mother would scold them and tell them it was wrong. They just kept running and running, and the girl and the mother eventually gave up on trying to wrangle them. I was appalled. I'm terrified that people are having children too young to raise them properly, and that those children will have more children they can't control, and everything will be a mess for everyone. I'm a lifeguard, and one day a cute blonde-haired boy of 4 or 5 was running by my stand. To him I say, "Hey buddy, don't run, you could fall and hurt yourself." He instantly slowed down and apologized. His dad, whom I hadn't seen nearby, was clearly a rimhead. He looked about 44 while probably being half that age and had a total of 6 teeth. He yelled loudly enough for everyone to hear. If one of them says something to you, tell them to frick off. The kid just looked at him and he goes, let me hear you say it. Saddest frick you I have ever heard in my life. That's incredibly disturbing. When I worked at a zoo, quite often parents would tell their kids to go throw stone sticks or to go kick the geese. The kids usually ranged anywhere from 2 to 12. I understand the geese are not the most well-liked birds, but teaching kids to harm animals is not right. One day I saw a kid going to kick the geese, but was too far away. I yelled at the parents to stop him, but they looked at me and laughed. As the kid got closer to the geese hissed, and before the kid could kick him, the geese bit him. The kid, startled and crying, made his way to his parents. The parents looked back to me and then to the kid, astonished. I smiled at them and walked away. For a brief moment, the parents thought you were like the Aquaman of waterfowl. Something came up on my Facebook timeline where an acquaintance went on a rant about how her kid's teacher sent him to the principal's office for some reason. The mother then goes on some dramatic status tirade about how don't nobody tell my kid what he ain't and is supposed to act. That's my kid and I raise him how I raise him, blah blah balls. It's the parents who are, for one, obviously undereducated frickheads, and two, to be offended that your kid was disciplined. Parents feel that if their kid does something bad in class it's an automatic result of horrid awful parenting. Kids are going to be kids, they do stupid crap. Teach them to admit they were wrong and to correct themselves, instead of lashing at any official who disciplines the kid accordingly. I can't stand those kind of parents, and their kids aren't going to be any better in the future for it. This is also a great revenge story. I did not write this. Now, I'm sure many of you have encountered little shoots in supermarkets. Little kids running about and knocking things over, being rude, walking all over their parents. You know the kind. But the worst are the biters. Yes, those little see that feel it is okay to bite you whenever they feel like it. Okay, here's the best part. A biter got me today when I was grocery shopping. He broke the freaking skin, too. This was when the gears started turning. The moment I saw a tiny sprinkle of blood on the little crap's teeth as he was grinning at me like the little sea he is, I made my eyes get wide and started screaming crap. Now, my good friend, Tom we'll call him, was there too, and he instantly picked up on it. He started shouting frick. Maybe he didn't get it frick. By now, the kid is scared shitless and starts crying. And instantly, Ms. Mom appears out of nowhere and starts getting pissy at us for yelling at her kid. Here's the kicker. I look her straight in the eye and say, "Ma'am, get your son tested as soon as possible. He just bit me and I'm freaking HIV positive." And now there is silence. Not a peep in the entire store. The brat knows he just fricked up big time because his mom isn't defending his butt. She just stares at me wide-eyed. I walk away from them. Buy my crap from the wide-eyed cashier. All the while blood is dripping from my calf, making a nice little trail on the floor. And, just as we leave, we start to hear the mother sobbing like the sea she is. I have never felt any more satisfaction than the moment I heard that sob. I realized what the story was about one stroke four-way though, but I decided to read the rest anyway for the pure satisfaction. Oh, I have some. I work on a cardiology unit in a hospital, which means I see a lot of not so intelligent people who have spent their lives overeating and smoking and lying around watching TV. Not to say all cardiology patients are like that, but many of them are. Anyway, had the entire extended family of one patient visit one night. I'm talking nieces, nephews, cousins, you name it. The patient wasn't even critically ill, just in for routine testing, but her family was hovering like she was on her deathbed. So one young mother had her baby, who was maybe a year older, until past 3 in the morning, playing with her in the room. For dinner, she fed her a king-size Butterfinger from the vending machine and a Sprite Zero in a bottle. Brilliant. Another time, more recently, we had a different patient on the floor. This patient's daughter was maybe in her 20s and was around 6 months pregnant. At one point she came out of the room at 2 AM wanting us to page the doctor on call, who was sleeping, because she felt like no one was telling her anything that was going on. Despite the nurses having explained the plan of care, she freaked the frick out. yelling about how she wasn't supposed to be under all this stress because it's bad for the baby. She had missed the doctor visiting the previous day because she was outside smoking a cigarette, like she did every goddamn hour. But the stress was bad for the baby. It's a good thing there are plenty of decent people to restore my faith in humanity, because I lose a little bit of it every time I deal with someone like that. God, the Sprite in a bottle really got to me. I hope with all the medical people around, someone gave that mother some nutrition advice. I'm a little late to this post, so this will be buried, but I have to share the story of my friend in junior. Hi, we were playing street hockey in a park, and this 8-year-oldish kid grabs our puck and throws it over a fence into the street. The first time, we just shrugged it off, went over and grabbed the puck and played on. The little puke stain runs out onto the court, grabs the puck, and tosses it again. This time, my friend confronts the kid, whose mom is over on a park bench watching her younger kid on the playground. After some short WTF-like argument, the kid says, "You can't do anything to me. My mom is right over there." With that, my friend bends over to the 8-year-old's level, makes a huge snorting sound, and spits a big wad of phlegm right onto the kid's half-open mouth. The horrified scream that came out of that kid was golden. It's beautiful. I live right next to two schools, a high school and a primary school UK, and I have a ground floor room. The other day I could hear a woman shouting and bawling, so I opened my curtains and I could see her, half in half out of her car, literally screaming at the top of her lungs at her kid to sit still. Meanwhile, the kid had burst into tears and she decided that the best way to manage this was to scream, "Stop freaking crying and sit still now, you little crap." I shouted at her to shut the frick up screaming in front of my house, and she realized someone was watching her verbally abuse her own child and promptly got in and drove off. That kid has little hope with a mother like that. I'll always regret the first time my family traveled to London. I must have been 7, 8 years old. I was really into postal stamps, and driving by in our car the first day I saw a philately shop and I really wanted to go. I remember that we had other plans for that day, but I didn't stop nagging to my parents about it, like every freaking hour subtly, but with insistence, for 3 days straight, while at museums, sightseeing, tours, and other awesome cool new stuff. I don't know if this is meant to praise philately, or if I was a total brat. You be the judge. At least you weren't talking about blowing people in the park. I think those people have always been around. It's not like the future is getting worse for our kids, because I remember growing up with kids who would steal my stuff if they came to my house or said they'd call the cops on me for walking on the sidewalk near their house. Unfortunately, you saw some bad parents and a kid who will probably end up in juvie or prison someday depending on how he shapes up. It's a shame that those people exist, but I think most people aren't generally that way. I'm constantly shocked by how many kids these days don't seem to know anything. No concept of basic history, a complete inability to read or write with anything approaching fluency, and so bad at math they can't even figure out when they're getting ripped off for drugs. In my town, the graduation rate is somewhere around 50%, and you can really tell when you talk to some of these kids. A vast number of US teenagers are totally unprepared for life and are going to cause a lot of trouble once they are out there in the world. I also worry a lot about how easy these kids are going to be to manipulate once they are old enough to vote. You could tell some of these kids that Washington killed all the Indians and that Lincoln was black and they wouldn't know any different. I have friends with children who think Abraham Lincoln fought vampires and that being smart is gay. It's not cool to be smart and everyone wants to be famous. I know a chick that has no job, no will to get a job, education, further herself, and has 6 kids now. She has smoked through all her pregnancies, ate shellfish, caffeine, etc. Pretty much every bad thing you can do while you are pregnant. Her oldest is almost 7 and youngest is about 3 months. All of her kids seem to be behind developmentally, either speech impediments, motor skills, or downright horrible behavior. I want to slap her back into reality, but it's my stepsister, whom I have never really ever had contact with outside Christmas. I work in fast food. I see parents ordering their small children the biggest mighty kids meals, all fries, no apples, with medium-sized shakes. It appalls me. Then they leave their mess on the table for one of us workers to clean up. There are some parents that make sure their kids say please and thank you and wait till we're done putting the food on the tray before taking it. But they are sadly outweighed by the ones who let their kids be bratty and stuff themselves with unhealthy food. When I was younger, the only thing I got my parents to get me was more toys from the fast food joints. I had a trunk basically filled with kids menu toys. Might have donated it to charity or given it to my little cousins. So, there was this kid I knew, roughly the same age as me. He was of a well-off family. You see, this child was not only post-pubescent at the age of 9 and a black belt, but he had never been told the word no before. The world was his oyster. What's that? There's something in the way? He just made sure it was half his height and then put it in a headlock that included me. Of course, he scarred his younger brother for life, who would have otherwise probably been a successful scholar. All through these ordeals in which people around him end up sadder than before they met him were never stopped. Not by the victims. It was physically out of their control. And not by his parents. I was 9. And looking back, I can see how fricked up his parents were. They did not care what he ate, how he acted, or what he said. Sometimes, they encouraged it. Went to a school with plenty of people like this, and I swear to God, these parents and all of their kind are the source of evil in this world. No matter what anyone says, our behavior is vastly learned. We behave as we are taught to behave, and if this huge amount of kids are taught to behave without discipline or kindness, then they will act accordingly, and that truly scares me. Think of all the douchebags. As a rule, I'm hesitant about allowing small children to play with my animals unless I know that they have been taught how to properly interact with them. Years ago, when I owned a wee little Maltese Lhasa I named Toffee, I was walking him through the local park when a kid around the age of 7 or 8 thought it would be a good idea to throw pine cones at my dog. Now Toffee was an idiot. I say this with total sincerity because he didn't have a lick of sense in his tiny frame. So he thought this was all great fun as pine cones bounced off his head. I told the kid to stop, and instead of stopping he ran up and tried to kick me in the shins. His parents were sitting about 20 feet away and saw this happening and did absolutely nothing. When the kid turns around to run off, I heave my foot back and plant it in his butt. As soon as the kid drops to the ground and starts crying, the parents suddenly realize that I'm not the type of person to mess around, and they start to make their way towards me with aggressive intent. I lock eyes with both of them and yell, "If you want me to knock you down too, you can keep coming. Otherwise take your spawn and frick off." They look at each other for a moment before scooping up their crying crotch lout and left. Throughout all of this, Toffee continued to happily wag his tail and bounce around. I hope you're a giant black man. When I was little, I had a neighborhood friend, we'll call him Jimmy, who I hung out with regularly. I would go to his house and knock on the door and he would come outside to play. Occasionally, his mom would answer the door and she would usually call him to the door to see me, but one time that was not the case. She came to the door, and when I asked if Jimmy could play outside, she sternly said no and proceeded to stick her tongue out at me. Of course, I asked why, and she said that I was never allowed to play outside with Jimmy ever again because my family was dangerous. She truly believed that my family was tapping her phone lines and that we were out to get her and her kids. She then slams the door in my face. I start to cry and run home. Because of his mom, I never played outside with Jimmy ever again. To this day, I still have no idea what happened and why she thought that my family was dangerous. I lost a friend that day and I don't really know why. Could be she was schizophrenic. My sister had a friend whose earliest manifestations were of believing she was being wiretapped and other things like that. Regardless, that sounds really traumatic, I was eating at a restaurant with a friend. The table next to us had a kid, maybe 3-4 years old. The parents were eating and giving food to their kid, who would proceed to throw everything either onto the table or onto the floor. They didn't try to clean up after their kid at all. Same when the kid knocked over a drink. They ended up leaving the mess after dinner. I know this isn't anything too serious, but I just can't believe it sometimes. The sheer number of people who have little to no regard for people around them. These types of people raise these types of children, who become adults. A poll was held by Dr. Phil on what they would do if their child was acting up at a restaurant. At least a quarter of them said it was best to ignore it. TT. I worry that the future will be filled with people unable to socially confront issues face to face and become truly independent adults. I feel there are two things that will cause this. Growing technology that allows people to interact on the internet and say whatever the frick they want without having to own up to being a dong, and secondly because parents these days basically live their child's lives for them. Many parents are worried about what their child will become without allowing their child to grow into a genuine human being from a path they chose. If you never let your kid learn from experience, how do you expect them to become an independent adult? It baffles me at the amount of helicopter parents I see telling their kid where to attend college, what to study, and what profession to pursue. The sad fact is that many of the children of these parents will never know what it is like to make your own decisions, inevitably leaving them unable to sever the ties from their parents or leading the child to rebel due to the lack of responsibility granted to the child. I was one such child. I deeply resent my father for his controlling ways and am currently finding life very difficult. At least I'm not an butthole, I don't think. I'm not too worried. 2 years ago my parents took my sister and I to Mexico because my father had Christmas off that year, and we were in a nature preserve when we saw an American couple, patriotic shirts and hat, hold their baby over a railing where a group of crocodiles were resting less than 5 feet down. After very quickly sprinting over to them and telling them about the capabilities of the crocs and how what they were doing was child endangerment, they kindly told me to frick off, buddy, this is my kid and I know what is best for him. Since then I have not been too worried about the future generation because there will most likely not be one. Now, I'm sure many of you have encountered little shoots in supermarkets. Little kids running about and knocking things over, being rude, walking all over their parents. You know the kind. But the worst are the biters. Yes, those little see that feel it is okay to bite you whenever they feel like it. Okay, here's the best part. A biter got me today when I was grocery stopping. He broke the freaking skin, too. This was when the gears started turning. The moment I saw a tiny sprinkle of blood on the little crap's teeth as he was grinning at me like the little sea he is, I made my eyes get wide and started screaming crap. Now, my good friend, Tom, we'll call him, was there too, and he instantly picked up on it. He started shouting frick. Maybe he didn't get it frick. By now, the kid is scared shitless and starts crying, and instantly, Ms. Mom appears out of nowhere and starts getting pissy at us for yelling at her kid. Here's the kicker. I look her straight in the eye and say, "Ma'am, get your son tested as soon as possible. He just bit me and I'm freaking HIV positive." And now there is silence. Not a peep in the entire store. The brat knows he just fricked up big time because his mom isn't defending his butt. She just stares at me wide-eyed. I walk away from them, buy my crap from the wide-eyed cashier, all the while blood is dripping from my calf, making a nice little trail on the floor. And, just as we leave, we start to hear the mother sobbing like the sea she is. I have never felt any more satisfaction than the moment I heard that sob. I was at my, not so, local Sony store just yesterday, and I was trying out the PS3 that they had for show with a few demos. The PS3 was located next to a PS Vita, to which a 10-11-year-old boy walks up. He starts playing FIFA 2012 with it, and then tries to strike up a conversation with me while complaining about how much the game sucks. I try to be nice and play along, saying things like, "Yeah, sure, MMHMMM," when in reality, I have the game for PC and he was just really bad at it. He keeps playing with the game and he starts dropping F-bombs out of nowhere. Frick, this game sucks. Oh my freaking god. What the frick is with this piece of crap game? My 9-year-old sister says to him, "You know, I don't really think you should say that in a store full of people." He answers, "Gee, you don't say." He keeps on playing for a good 10 more minutes till the point where he proceeds to rapidly and furiously punch the screen of the PS Vita he's using. I started to get a little irate inside, and I was about to, respectfully, call him off for being a little, well, you know, but I just decided to grab my stuff and my sister and leave. We walk out and my mom drags us over to Home Goods. And wouldn't you believe it, the same kid is there with his mother muttering cuss words while his mom looks around like an airhead. The kids next door. Jesus Christ. One was climbing on the fence between our yards and fell into our yard and took out some plants. Then the dad just goes, "Are you okay? Honey, no, you shouldn't be climbing on the fence. No, apologize for crushing their plants. No, nothing." Also, I'm pretty sure I heard the eldest, 7 or 8, out there using a saw to build something with his friend with no supervision. Someone is going to get seriously hurt because those parents never set any boundaries. It's also why I don't babysit for them anymore, because even if they bit me, the parents wouldn't punish them at all over it. I was on my own. I lived in Tennessee for most of my adulthood and my kids went to TN schools. On parents' night at the high school, I remember looking at the other parents and seeing several in slouchy positions with a look on their faces that probably matched that of their disinterested kids when they were sitting in class. This was in a very small town, very backward and closed-minded. I'm very glad to be out of there. Okay, here's my one story. I have 2 cousins whose parents are divorced, but rich. The result of which is a freaking crazy parents. B. Kids get more things than any person reasonably needs due to a kind of who gives the better gifts war between the two, and C. They get away with freaking everything. Now on this particular occasion they were visiting my grandmother and I was with them since I live about 10 minutes away. After a horrific day of them just being little shoots and even calling my grandmother a B to her face, I was pretty much fed up. Grandmother ran into a CVS nearby to get something and left me in the car with them. They proceeded to have a pinching fight with each other that ended in a who could pinch me hardest fight. But I swear to God, the kid pinched me once and like lightning I slapped him so hard his glasses broke. Of course, being over 10 years older than them and feeling like a terrible cousin, I had a tearful confession to my grandmother when she got back. All the while that little crap was grinning like, "Haha, I made you cry." I was working at Target once and this lady came in with her little crap of a child throwing a tantrum. I asked if she needed help and she frantically said, "A sucker, I need a sucker," or some candy, then proceeded to run to the register area and grabbed a sucker to pacify her child because they wanted candy. Are you kidding me? I would have been popped on the mouth if I ever threw a tantrum in public, and my mother would have never pacified me with candy. The association of being sad with wanting food just sums up obesity perfectly. In the barber shop yesterday, these 2 kids were running around acting wild and their mother was just letting them run wild. No discipline or anything. One was spinning around in one of the barber chairs knocking stuff over and the other almost ran over an old lady with his skate shoes. So yes, I worry about a future generation where there's no consequences for horrible behavior. I work at Costco, so most days I do see terrible parents teaching their children to be little frickwads. One story sticks out in my head to the contrary. I had just finished my shift and was buying a take-home pizza. Don't freaking judge me, they were on sale. And when I got in line, a mother turned to her daughter and told her to put some cheese back. It was a busy weekend and it was more of a crowd than a line, and the girl walked to an unattended cart and tossed the cheese in. Her mother saw her and asked, "Is that where that cheese came from?" "No." "Go put it back where it belongs." Faith in humanity restored. I took the cheese back myself. I just need to announce this. Today, my boyfriend and I are closing on our first house, and we're super excited. I'm 25 and ever since I hit puberty, I've wanted children. I love the crap out of kids. Unlike everyone that I went to high school with, I am still childless, which doesn't bother me. I've always wanted to get financially stable before having kids. I've always wanted to find the one to have the kids with. I finally found him. BTW. Things are looking good for the future. With that said, Reddit, I promise you, I'm going to raise the most beautiful, non-spoiled, polite, educated children that I possibly can. The future terrifies me. I feel like it's my duty to breed and raise smart children so that there can be some hope somewhere. Right there with you. I'm still years away from having kids, need financial stability, house, yada yada, but dang, am I gonna give it my all. Also, suits. My kids will wear suits at all times. Hopefully. I'm worried for my nephew's health. He has an extremely overprotective mother. He's 6 years old and he still breastfeeds. I worry about him not having a male guidance after his father John died tragically, and even then the marriage between his parents was not a good one. I tried to invite his mother and him to stay at Winterfell so he could perhaps spend time with my own 2 boys Bran and Rickon, but his mother locks him and her in her castle. I truly fear for the future of House Arryn. They have always been good friends to the Starks. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.